My beloved child, come close and listen with an open heart, for what I am about to share is not from the lips of man, but from the breath of heaven. Tonight, I speak to you as a father, not with fear, but with the trembling of someone who has touched the edge of the divine. It happened when the evening winds had settled and the last candle in my chamber flickered low. I looked at the old clock on the wall, and the hand stood still at 9:31 p.m. Not 9:30, not 9:32. The air around me grew still, almost as if the earth itself bowed in silence. And then, my child, there came a light. Not a harsh light, not a burning flame, but a gentle radiance like the breath of dawn wrapped in holiness. My heart shook, not with fear, but with a deep, holy knowing. For I felt him. I felt heaven draw near. In that sacred moment, a presence stronger than storms, yet softer than dew, stood before me. Wings that held the whisper of ancient battles, eyes filled with the calm of eternity, and a voice that could shake mountains yet chose to speak in a whisper. It was Archangel Michael. He did not shout. Angels never need to shout. He simply looked at me with the weight of heaven resting on his shoulders, and he said, at 9:31 p.m., "The Lord has spoken. His final warning is here. Tell his children. Tell them they cannot skip this. God says this message is their last hope to save them." My child, my heart nearly stopped. Not because of fear, but because of the love carried in his words. A love so fierce, so protective, so desperate to awaken us. It was not the cry of a judge, it was the cry of a father reaching for his wandering children. The walls around me trembled softly, as if every stone understood the weight of heaven's message. I felt the warmth of God's breath upon the earth, a final call, a final invitation, a final reaching of his mighty hand toward his sons and daughters who drifted too far from his embrace. Michael's voice grew softer, almost sorrowful. Something unexpected and dangerous will happen tomorrow. But hear me, child of God. The danger he spoke of was not a doom of the world, not thunder or fire or destruction. No, it was a danger of the soul. A moment ahead that could shake a person if they walk without God's covering. A moment meant to remind, not to destroy. I tell you this with trembling love. Heaven does not warn to frighten. Heaven warns to rescue. So tonight, as you hear my voice, open your heart like a lamp that longs for oil. For the message I will share with you is not only holy, it is urgent. And heaven watches to see who listens. My beloved child, lean in. The night is speaking. My beloved child, as you sit with me now, let your heart be still, for what I am about to unfold is the very thread of heaven's tapestry. After Archangel Michael delivered those trembling words, the atmosphere around me shifted, as though the very air itself became aware of the presence standing before me. I could feel that I was not merely witnessing a moment. I was being drawn into a spiritual encounter designed for all of God's children, including you, right now. Michael stepped forward, and with every movement, the room glowed brighter. His wings were not like the images you may have seen in paintings. They were not static or decorative. They moved with the rhythm of eternity itself, every feather shimmering like gold touched by lightning. When he opened them fully, I felt a wind pass through me, but it was not a wind of this earth. It was a wind that spoke, a wind that carried a message. "Do not fear," he said, his voice calm as a gentle river yet strong as a mountain's foundation. God sends warnings not to frighten his children, but to shake them awake. The hearts of many have grown heavy. Their eyes have grown dim. Their paths have become cluttered with noise, with temptations, with distractions that steal their purpose. My child, when he spoke those words, it felt as though the veil between heaven and earth became thin. Like a curtain you could almost reach out and pull aside. I saw shadows around people, shadows of confusion, of exhaustion, of wandering souls searching for meaning in a world that offers none. And Michael said, "The Lord speaks because he loves. The Lord warns because he longs to gather his children before the storm reaches them." I bowed my head because the holiness of his presence was overwhelming. Yet even as I bowed, I felt Michael gently lift my chin with a touch lighter than a whisper. "Do not bow out of fear," he said. "Bow out of recognition. Recognition that heaven sees you. Heaven sees every struggle, every tear, every thought you have buried in silence. My beloved child, he was not only speaking to me, he was speaking to you." For as he uttered those words, I felt the message stretch far beyond my chamber, reaching living rooms, bedrooms, silent cars, lonely hearts, and searching spirits. Heaven was stretching its hand through me to reach you. Michael's face softened, carrying a sorrow so deep it felt like the aching heart of God himself. "Many of God's children," he said, "have forgotten their first love. They have forgotten the voice that once called to them in the night. They have forgotten the warmth they once felt in his presence. Their hearts drift, not because they are wicked, but because the world has grown loud. Too loud." He lifted one hand, and light poured from it. Not harsh, not blinding, but gentle, like sunlight trickling through leaves. Within that light I saw people walking. Some walked with purpose. Some stumbled. Some reached out, but could not see what they were reaching for. And Michael said, "This is why the Lord sends his warning. This is why he chose the time 9:31 p.m. It is not the time of a clock, it is the time of the soul. It is the hour when heaven knocks, one final time before closing a chapter and beginning another. My child, I know this may sound heavy. I know it may stir something deep inside you. But let me assure you, heaviness is not the same as hopelessness. Michael's presence was not meant to burden, but to awaken. His message was not meant to frighten, but to prepare. He came like a warrior who knows a battle is near, yet kneels beside the one he protects to whisper, "Stand with me. Do not be afraid." Then he spoke again, and his voice carried a thunder that was wrapped in softness. "Tell God's children that heaven is not far. Tell them that the Father is not angry. He is yearning. Tell them that danger does not come to destroy, but to direct. Tell them that tomorrow is not a punishment, it is a turning." The moment he said this, the vision around me shifted. I saw a narrow path, glowing like a thin line of fire, and beside it stood a broader path, crowded with noise and shadows. The narrow path looked delicate, but I knew it led upward into the light. And I understood what Michael was sent to warn us about was not the destruction of the world, but the destruction of purpose. The danger ahead was not a physical event, it was the slow fading of the soul. He looked at me with eyes so full of compassion, I felt my own heart crack open. "Tell them," he repeated, "that this message is their last hope. Not because God is closing his heart, but because his children must open theirs. My beloved child, come closer again, for what unfolded next carries a weight that still echoes in my spirit." After Archangel Michael delivered the message, the room shifted once more, as though the heavens wished to make sure I understood the time stamped upon the warning. The clock on the wall, the old wooden clock that had never once stopped ticking, seemed frozen at that very moment, 9:31 p.m., as if eternity itself had reached down and pressed its finger upon the hands of time. I stared at those numbers, and a stirring rose within me. Why that specific moment? Why that exact time? It felt as though the entire atmosphere responded to the question hidden in my heart. For Michael turned slowly, his eyes gleaming with a depth that held galaxies. He spoke with the rhythm of one who has carried messages since the dawn of creation. "Time," he said, "is not always what humans believe it to be. You think of it as seconds, minutes, and hours. But heaven sees time as alignment. Heaven marks moments when the heart of God reaches down to intersect the path of humanity. And 9:31 p.m. is one of those intersections." My child, when he said those words, it felt as though the numbers themselves began to breathe, to pulse. In that moment, they were no longer cold digits on a clock. They were alive with meaning, with the whisper of something sacred. Michael continued, 9 is the symbol of divine completion. It is the moment when God finishes a season, when heaven closes one chapter to open another. It is the number of birthing, of endings that are truly beginnings. I felt the weight of his words settle into my spirit. Completion. A divine ending. A season drawing to its close. And 3, he said, his voice growing softer, is the number of the Holy Trinity. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. One God, 3 expressions of love. It speaks of unity, purpose, and heavenly order. A warmth filled the room as he spoke the name of the Trinity, as though the very air bowed in reverence. And 1, he whispered, is the number of God's oneness, his sovereignty, his supremacy, his unmatched, unshaken authority. It is the reminder that above all things, there is one God, one truth, one path, one hope. My beloved child, when he wove those meanings together, I felt the revelation burst open like a light inside me. 9. 3. 1. Completion. The Trinity. The one true God. Michael said, when heaven speaks through numbers, it is not coincidence. It is a call. 9:31 is the hour when the human heart must choose. It is the door between the old and the new. It is the moment when God says, return to me before the next season shifts. As he spoke, I felt a trembling, a holy trembling, move through my bones. It was not fear. It was recognition. Recognition that heaven was trying to awaken its children before the hour of drifting grew too deep, before the shadows of distraction pulled them too far. The Archangel stepped closer, and his wings folded gently behind him. Many, he said, have forgotten how heaven speaks. They think God only speaks through thunder or miracles. But sometimes he speaks through the smallest details, through the numbers you glance at without thought, through the quiet whispers at the end of the day. My child, this touched me deeply. How many times had we glanced at the clock, unaware that heaven may be nudging us, whispering to us? How many times had we brushed aside the tug in our spirit, thinking it was nothing? Yet heaven sees every moment as purposeful. Michael lifted his hand once again, and a soft glow illuminated the space between us. In that glow, I saw scenes of people sitting alone at 9:31 p.m., some in front of their televisions, some scrolling their phones, some lying restless in their beds, some holding their heads in weariness. And I heard a soft whisper behind the vision, "Wake up. My child, I am calling you." The Archangel turned his gaze toward the vision and said, "This is why God chose that time. It is the hour when the soul grows quiet, when distractions soften, when heaven can finally nudge a heart that has been running all day." And then he looked straight into my eyes. "Tell them," he said, "that 9:31 p.m. is not the warning. It is the invitation. The warning is what comes when the invitation is ignored." My beloved child, those words struck me with holy fire. The invitation, the call, the final reaching of God's hand. A door that heaven urges us to walk through before it swings shut. Michael's wings unfurled just slightly, sending ripples of light dancing across the room. Tell them that tomorrow is not a day on the calendar. It is the next moment of the soul. It is what comes after the invitation. And only God can see what awaits beyond the threshold. I felt my breath catch. Tomorrow was not meant to frighten us, but to prepare us. To turn our hearts toward the one who holds every tomorrow in his hands. My beloved child, as the revelation of the time settled in my spirit, something deeper began to unfold before me. Archangel Michael's expression changed, not into anger, not into severity, but into a sorrowful compassion that seemed to echo the heart of God himself. It was then that he spoke the words that pressed upon my soul like a holy weight. The Lord's final warning is not a threat. It is his final cry of love. In that moment, my child, I felt something inside me break, not in weakness, but in understanding. How often do people hear the word warning and imagine wrath, destruction, punishment? But heaven does not speak as the world speaks. Heaven's warnings are woven out of love, not fury. They are the gentle hands of a father pulling his child away from the edge of a cliff, not the clenched fists of judgment. Michael stepped closer, his presence filling the air with a warmth that felt like the embrace of a father who has waited too long for his child to come home. "Tell them," he said, "that God does not warn because he is angry. He warns because his children have wandered so far that their hearts no longer feel the pull of his voice." As he spoke, I saw visions flickering like reflections on water. I saw people smiling on the outside while their hearts quietly crumbled within. I saw souls carrying burdens they never speak of, wounds they ignore, sins they hide, dreams they've abandoned, prayers they've stopped praying. And above all these images, I sensed heaven's grief. Not disappointment, but longing. Michael's voice softened. There is a distance growing between heaven and many hearts. Not because heaven has moved, but because distractions have multiplied. The world has become loud, very loud, and in the noise, the gentle whisper of God's call is overlooked. My beloved child, when he said those words, a great sorrow washed over me. I felt the ache of a father who watches his children chase everything but him, trying to fill a spiritual hunger with earthly things. I felt the yearning of God, a yearning deeper than oceans, older than time, to gather his sons and daughters under the shelter of his presence. Michael continued, the final warning is this: return. Return before the heart hardens. Return before the distractions become chains. Return before the world's noise silences the Spirit's whisper. Return before tomorrow comes, for tomorrow brings a shift that only those close to God will understand. My child, these words were not spoken as condemnation. They were spoken like the cry of a shepherd who sees the wolves approaching while the sheep wander unknowingly. It was a plea, a call from heaven's mercy, a last invitation before a new season arrives. Then the vision around us deepened. I saw people standing on a road, some walking toward the light, some drifting away, and some standing still, unsure of which way to turn. Michael pointed toward those who were still, frozen between choices, unable to decide. These, he said, are the ones heaven weeps for the most. They are not lost, but they are not awake. They hear God's voice, but delay their response. They feel his tug, but postpone obedience. They sense his warning, but assume tomorrow will be kinder. His words pierced me. How many souls had become experts at delaying God? How many hearts whispered, I will change tomorrow, not knowing that tomorrow is not promised? Michael's wings unfolded slightly again, and the light around him stirred like living fire. Tell them, he said, that the danger ahead is not what they imagine. It is not a storm outside. It is a storm within. The danger is the lukewarm heart, the distracted soul, the drifting spirit. The danger is believing you have more time when heaven is shouting the time is now. My beloved child, his voice carried the strain of someone who has fought countless battles on behalf of humanity. I could sense the urgency of heaven, not in anger, but in desperation. Heaven is not counting down to punish. Heaven is counting down to rescue. Michael spoke again. The final warning is not an ending. It is the last invitation to a beginning. It is the moment God stretches his arms wide and says, come home before the next chapter begins. And then, in the flickering glow of that moment, I felt the heartbeat of God. It pulsed through the air. It pulsed through my spirit. It pulsed through the silence. A heartbeat filled with love, yearning, mercy, and hope. Heaven is not trying to frighten you, my child. Heaven is trying to wake you. God's final warning is the call of a father who refuses to let his children walk blind into the next season. It is the last pull toward the light before the shadows of distraction grow thicker. It is the final nudge toward purpose before wasted years begin to tighten like chains. It is the last whisper of mercy before the heart becomes numb to the sound of God's voice. My beloved child, now listen with a heart wide open, for what I am about to reveal carries the very urgency of heaven. After Archangel Michael spoke of the Father's longing, I felt the room tighten with a holy stillness, as though all of creation paused to hear what heaven would say next. Michael looked at me with eyes that carried both fire and tenderness, and he said, "Tell them they cannot skip this message. Tell them that to ignore it is to walk blindly into a storm they were meant to rise above." My child, those words echoed through my spirit like thunder wrapped in sorrow. Heaven does not waste words. When the Archangel says that a message cannot be skipped, it is because the soul is being placed at a crossroads. A moment where one step leads toward light, and the other toward deeper wandering. And so I asked him, with trembling lips, "Why, Michael? Why is this message so critical? Why must it not be ignored?" He stepped closer, and the glow from his presence illuminated the room with a soft radiance that felt like warm morning sunlight. "Because," he said, "many have allowed their hearts to grow asleep. They hear sermons yet remain unmoved. They feel a tug in their spirit yet do not respond. They sense the nearness of God yet choose delay. The danger of tomorrow is not what will happen around them, but what will happen within them if they do not awaken today." My beloved child, these words cut me deeply. For I have seen it myself, how easily people become numb to God's call. They scroll through noise, chase after empty things, and fill their minds with distractions. The voice of heaven becomes faint, not because God stops speaking, but because his children stop listening. Michael saw this. Heaven saw this. And that is why the message comes with such urgency. He continued, with a sorrowful firmness, "The enemy does not need to destroy someone loudly. Sometimes he destroys them silently, by lulling them into comfort, distraction, and delay. Many think they are safe because nothing looks wrong. But spiritual danger is rarely obvious. It begins quietly, in the drifting of the heart." As he spoke, the light behind him shifted into scenes. I saw people waking up each morning, busy, tired, overwhelmed. They walked through their day unaware that their spirit was slowly weakening. Not by sin alone, but by neglect, by hurry, by noise, by forgetting the one who called them by name before they were born. "Tell them," Michael said, "that this message is their rescue. It is the hand of God extended toward them before they drift too far. It is the last hope he offers before their hearts become hardened by the weight of life." The weight of those words filled me with holy urgency. My beloved child, you must understand, heaven is not trying to scare you. Heaven is trying to save you. When God sends a final warning, it is not to push you away, but to pull you closer than ever before. It is the cry of a father who refuses to lose his child to the shadows. Michael spoke again. There is something approaching each soul, an unexpected moment, a test, a shift, a decision, a temptation, a turning. If they do not anchor themselves in God now, they will be shaken by tomorrow. But if they stand with him, the very thing meant to shake them will become the thing that elevates them. My child, the danger of tomorrow is not a catastrophe. It is a spiritual turning point. A moment when the enemy whispers, when confusion rises, when weakness is exposed, when choices matter more than ever. Heaven wants you prepared. Heaven wants you covered. Heaven wants you awake. Then the Archangel's voice softened into a tone almost pleading. This message must be carried. It must reach every ear it can. Not because of fear, but because of love. Many will not hear the voice of heaven unless someone delivers it to them. I felt those words drill into my soul. And then, my beloved child, something unexpected happened. Michael lifted his hand, and a stream of light flowed outward, forming shapes of countless people connected in ways I did not fully understand. And he said, "Every soul you reach becomes a spark. Every spark carries the warning. Every warning becomes a shield to someone who might have been caught unprepared." In that moment, I understood. This message is not simply for you. It is meant to travel through you. Heaven's urgency becomes heaven's assignment. Michael concluded with a solemn whisper. Tell them to lift this message. Tell them to let it travel. Tell them to allow it to reach those who do not yet know they need it. This is not earthly promotion. It is spiritual obedience. My beloved child, I must speak this to you gently yet firmly. When heaven says a message must not be skipped, it also means it must not be hidden. If your heart feels stirred, if your spirit senses the weight of what you have just heard, then understand that you have been chosen to carry it. And so I say this to you with love. If this message has touched you, if it has awakened you, if you feel heaven's hand upon your soul, then do what the Spirit prompts. Lift this message. Share it. Spread it. Not for me, but because heaven desires it. Because someone else needs this warning as desperately as you did. Because it may be their last hope as well. Carry it outward as an act of faith. Let it travel as an act of obedience. Let it be known as an act of love. My beloved child, sit close again, for the air around us grows heavy with the next revelation. After the Archangel finished speaking of the message that must not be skipped, a silence settled over the room. It was not an empty silence, but one filled with meaning, like the pause between two waves before the next one rises with greater power. I breathed slowly, sensing that heaven had not yet finished speaking. And I was right. For in that holy stillness, Michael's countenance changed. His eyes, which moments ago carried warmth, now held a fierce clarity, as though he were looking into storms that only he could see. Then he spoke, and his voice carried the weight of the unseen. "The danger of tomorrow," he said, "is not what your eyes expect. It is not the kind of danger people imagine when they hear warnings. It is not a disaster, not a catastrophe, not the crumbling of the world. The greatest danger is the one that enters quietly, through the cracks of an unguarded soul." His words stirred a trembling within me. I felt something shift in the air, as though unseen currents moved around us. I whispered back, barely finding my voice, "What danger, Michael? What comes tomorrow?" He stepped into the center of the room, and the light surrounding him intensified, forming waves of brightness that pulsed like a beating heart. "Tomorrow," he said, "is not a date, not a number on the calendar. Tomorrow is a moment. The next moment. The next test. The next temptation. The next turning. It is the moment when the path splits without warning. And the danger lies in walking into that moment unprepared." My beloved child, the way he spoke made me see that heaven views time differently. What we call tomorrow, they call the next shift of the heart. And the danger he spoke of was not physical, it was spiritual. It was the kind of danger that cloaks itself in normality. A decision that seems small. A distraction that feels harmless. A temptation that whispers softly. A moment that appears ordinary yet carries consequences for the soul. Michael continued, "Many think danger comes with thunder, but often it arrives in silence. It comes as a thought planted quietly. It comes as a weariness that steals prayer. It comes as a disappointment that makes the heart withdraw. It comes as a lie disguised as comfort. These are the dangers of tomorrow." As he spoke, visions unfolded before me again. I saw a young woman sitting alone, discouraged by a failure she did not understand. In that discouragement, she considered giving up on her calling. I saw men tempted to step into something he knew was not of God, believing it would not matter just this once. I saw a weary soul choosing bitterness instead of forgiveness. And with each scene, Michael's voice echoed, "These are the dangers that shape destinies. These are the moments that shift the course of a life. My child, the enemy rarely wages war with noise. He wages it with subtlety. He attacks purposes, not bodies. He targets faith before he targets circumstances. He whispers lies in the quiet moments when the soul is tired. And tomorrow, your next decision, your next moment of weakness, your next test is where these attacks wait." Michael turned toward me, and I felt the gravity of his gaze. "Tell them," he said, "that tomorrow's danger is not meant to frighten them, but to awaken them. When the Father warns, it is to shield his children from the invisible snares that lie ahead. If they stand close to him, nothing tomorrow brings will harm them. But if they walk alone, they will find themselves shaken." A deep stirring filled my chest, because I understood then what heaven was truly saying. The danger is not the event, but the unprepared heart. A person anchored in God can walk through storms untouched, but a drifting soul can stumble on the smallest stone. Michael continued, "The unexpected moment coming ahead is not meant to break them, but to reveal them. It will show the truth of where they stand. It will reveal whether they have oil in their lamps, whether they have listened to the whisper of heaven, whether they have returned to the Father's embrace." My beloved child, the realization hit me with holy force. Tomorrow is the test. Not an outward test, but an inward one. A test that reveals whether the soul walks with God or walks alone. A test not to expose shame, but to awaken purpose. The Archangel's voice softened, filled now with hope. "Tell them that those who stand under God's covering have nothing to fear. For the moment that shakes will also elevate. The moment that tests will also strengthen. The moment that surprises will also position them for the next chapter of their destiny." I felt a warmth wash over me at these words. Heaven was not warning us to leave us trembling. Heaven was preparing us to stand. Michael took one final step forward, and his presence radiated a calm authority. "The danger is real," he said, "but so is the covering. So is the protection. So is the strength. The Father does not reveal danger without revealing himself. Tell them that if they cling to him, tomorrow will not break them, it will build them." My beloved child, hear this in your spirit. The warning is not the end. It is the shield. The danger is not the threat. It is the revelation. Tomorrow is not the fear. It is the turning point. Now, take a breath, for what heaven revealed next will lift your spirit even higher. My beloved child, let your spirit rest in this next revelation, for after the Archangel spoke of tomorrow's hidden danger, something remarkable unfolded. The light in the room did not fade. Instead, it grew fuller, richer, as though a new dimension of heaven was drawing near. Michael stood tall, his wings unfolding slowly behind him. They stretched so wide that the very air trembled. It was not a display of power. It was a declaration. A reminder that though danger may rise, heaven rises higher. He looked at me with a gaze that carried centuries of battles won, and he said, "Do not let the children of God tremble over the warning. Let them tremble over the thought of walking alone. For where God's presence is, danger loses its teeth." My beloved child, those words struck my soul like a gentle fire. The warning was not meant to drive fear. It was meant to drive closeness. And now, heaven was about to reveal the covering that would stand over those who choose to walk with him. Michael stepped forward, and the air around him rippled like waves. A radiance circled him, bright as lightning, yet soft as dawn. Then his voice filled the room with the strength that made every shadow retreat to the corners. "Tell them of the protection," he said. "Tell them that though tomorrow holds a test, heaven has already prepared the victory. Tell them that though the enemy plans secretly, God has prepared openly. Tell them that though the danger may rise suddenly, the armies of heaven stand ready." As he spoke, the room shifted into a vision. I saw a vast field, stretching farther than my eyes could reach. Darkness gathered on one side like a swelling storm, but on the other side stood a host of angels. Not delicate figures from paintings, no. These were warriors, tall as mountains, radiant as stars, each one carrying a presence that made darkness tremble simply by existing. At the front of this army stood Michael himself, armor gleaming with the light not of this world. His sword glowed like fire infused with purity, every inch of it carrying the authority of the one who sent him. When he lifted that sword, even in vision, the ground shook. Not with fear, but with power. Power that did not threaten, but protected. "This," he said, motioning toward the army, "is what stands with those who walk with God. Not one child of heaven walks alone. Not one heart faces tomorrow without covering. The host of the Most High surrounds them. The light of the Almighty goes before them. And no darkness, no whisper, no weapon formed in shadows will overcome them." My beloved child, hearing these words felt like a cool rain falling upon a weary soul. The warning had weight, yes, but this revelation carried strength enough to hold the entire world. It was then I understood why the Archangel came, not only with a message, but with a demonstration. Heaven wanted not just to awaken, but to assure. The vision shifted again. I saw souls, ordinary men, women, children, walking through their days. Some carried invisible burdens. Some felt alone. Some had tears behind their smiles. Some fought silent battles that no one around them understood. And yet, around each one, I saw a faint glow. A shield. A presence. A covering they did not even know was there. "Tell them," Michael said. that the danger of tomorrow is not greater than the God who guards them. Tell them that the enemy tries to strike when they are unaware, but heaven remains aware even when they are not. Tell them that the Father has sent his angels, not to frighten them, but to walk beside them. My child, I felt a warmth spread through my chest as he spoke, for I realized how deeply heaven hears. God does not warn without preparing. He does not speak without guarding. He does not call without covering. This is the nature of divine love. Michael continued, protection is not the absence of battles. Protection is the presence of God in every battle. Those who cling to him will not fall. Those who anchor themselves in his presence will rise like eagles. For when the moment of testing comes, the strength of heaven will stand within them. The vision faded, and once again I saw only Michael before me. But the strength of the revelation remained in the air, settling over me like a mantle. The Archangel raised his hand slightly, and I felt a peace, deep and firm, settle into my bones. Tell God's children, he said, that the unexpected will come. But they must not fear the unexpected. They must prepare their hearts, not with worry, but with worship. Not with panic, but with prayer. Not with trembling, but with trust. For the ones who stand under God's covering will not face tomorrow's danger alone. Heaven marches beside them. My beloved child, as I listened, I realized that the message of tomorrow's danger and heaven's protection were never separate. They were intertwined. The danger awakens, yet the protection empowers. The warning alerts, yet the covering reassures. Heaven never reveals the threat without revealing the triumph. And so, I tell you now with the same authority Michael carried, the angelic host stands ready. The covering is real. And if you walk with God, you walk with power. My beloved child, as the vision of the heavenly army faded and the room returned to stillness, something softer yet deeper settled upon my spirit. The fierce radiance of Michael's presence began to shift into a gentler glow, like a flame lowering not because it is dying, but because it is preparing to reveal something intimate. The Archangel looked at me with eyes that carried not only authority but tenderness, an echo of the Father's own heart. And he said, "Now listen closely, for this part is the very heartbeat of heaven. This is what God calls his last hope." My child, those words send a hush across my soul. God's last hope. The phrase carried weight, but not the weight of despair. No, it carried the weight of longing. Like a parent who has stretched out every effort, every call, every whisper, every nudge, and now reaches out with one final tug of the heart. Not to condemn, but to rescue. I could feel, even before Michael spoke again, that this was not a warning of punishment, it was a plea of love. Michael stepped closer, and every movement felt purposeful. "The Father does not lose hope," he said. "But he knows when the heart of a child is dangerously close to drifting beyond the sound of his voice. God's last hope is his final call before the heart grows numb. It is his last attempts to awaken them before they settle into spiritual sleep." As he spoke, I felt something inside me ache. I could sense the truth of it. How many hearts drift not because they are evil, but because they are tired. How many souls withdraw not because they reject God, but because life has pressed them into weariness. How many people lose their way not in a sudden fall, but in a slow, quiet fading. Michael continued, "Tell them that God's last hope is not a threat. It is an invitation. It is the final opening of the door before the season changes. It is the last call to return before the path becomes harder to find. God calls because His love will not release them to wander without a fight." My beloved child, in that moment, I saw a vision unfold like a story written in light. I saw a young man who once prayed every night, slowly letting days pass without speaking to God. Not in rebellion, but in exhaustion. I saw a mother who once worshipped with fire, allowing disappointment to dim the flame. I saw a girl whose faith was once vibrant, now coated with the dust of unanswered questions. And through it all, I sensed the Father reaching, not with anger, but with sorrowful love. Michael looked upon these scenes with compassion carved into his very being. "These," he said, "are the ones heaven cries for. Not the rebellious, but the fading. Not the wicked, but the wounded. Not the cold, but the weary. The ones who still love God, but feel too heavy to lift their hands. These are the hearts God calls with His last hope." My child, I felt tears well in my eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming tenderness of God. To think that the Creator of all things spends His energy fighting for the hearts of those who barely feel strong enough to whisper His name. To think that His warnings come not like thunder, but like a whisper trying desperately to be heard above the noise of life. The Archangel went on, "Tell them that God's last hope is not the end of mercy. It is the fullness of mercy. It is mercy knocking louder, reaching farther, embracing deeper. It is heaven fighting for them even when they have stopped fighting for themselves." Then the vision changed again. I saw people standing in front of open doors, each door glowing with light. Some stepped through. Some stood hesitant. Some lingered, torn between comfort and calling. And Michael said, "This is the moment God speaks of. This is the tomorrow that approaches. The moment when hearts must choose whether to step through the door of purpose or remain in the shadows of delay." My beloved child, what struck me most was that the danger of tomorrow was intertwined with the hope of tomorrow. For the very moment that tests you is the same moment that can lead to your awakening. The moment that shakes you is the moment that can reset your path. The unexpected event that rises can either break you or break open your destiny, depending on whether your heart responds to God's final call. Michael lowered his voice, and the gentleness of it felt like the hush of heaven itself. "Tell them that God is calling them home. Not home to heaven, but home to His presence. Home to prayer. Home to purpose. Home to the fire they once carried. Home to the love that once defined them. This is His last hope. Not a punishment, but a restoration." My child, those words wrapped around me like a warm cloak. I could feel the Father longing not for perfection, but for connection. Not for flawless devotion, but for an awakened heart. His last hope is simply that His children would turn to Him again before the next chapter arrives. And now, my beloved child, the message deepens further still. For heaven does not only call the heart, it reveals the path forward. My beloved child, let your heart stay open as we step deeper into what heaven revealed next. After Michael spoke of God's last hope, the atmosphere around us grew still again, as though creation, itself was listening with bowed head and quiet breath. I could sense that the message was now shifting from revelation to responsibility. What heaven had shown was not merely to be understood, it was to be lived. And so the Archangel's expression changed once more. The sorrow of earlier faded into a solemn strength, the kind of strength that calls a person not only to hear the truth, but to rise because of it. He spoke slowly, each word saturated with purpose. Now tell them what they must do in this moment, for warnings are meaningless without response. Protection is powerless without alignment, and hope is empty unless the heart steps forward. My child, his words carry the tone of a commander, yet the compassion of a shepherd. It was as if heaven itself leaned forward to watch how the human heart would respond. And Michael continued, "The children of God must understand that the next step does not require perfection. It requires willingness." A gentle light began to fill the room again, not the piercing brightness of earlier visions, but a warm glow like a flame that draws a soul closer rather than pushing it back. In that glow, I felt the Spirit whispering, not through thunder, but through a soft, persistent call, "Come nearer. Do not drift. Do not delay." Michael then turned his gaze toward me and said, "Tell them that their first call is to seek God again, not as a ritual, but as a return. The Father is not asking for eloquent prayers. He is asking for an honest heart, a simple whisper, a turning of the soul back toward His light." My beloved child, these words struck me deeply because they carried such simplicity. Heaven was not demanding a mountain. They were asking for a step toward openness, a step toward listening, a step toward surrender. For tomorrow's danger is not defeated by strength, but by closeness to God. As Michael spoke, the vision expanded before me once more. I saw men and women sitting quietly in their rooms, some with heads bowed, some with hands trembling, some with a heaviness they could not describe. And as they whispered simple prayers, prayers like, "God, help me," or "God, I return to you," or "God, open my heart again," I saw beams of light descend upon them. Not dramatic, not loud, just pure, gentle, restoring light. And instantly, the shadows around them loosened their grip. The Archangel said, "This is what happens when a child returns." Heaven moves instantly. Light breaks through quietly. The covering strengthens. The path ahead becomes clearer. Then he lifted his hand toward the vision of people walking along two paths, the narrow glowing one and the wider darkened one. "Tell them," he said, "that now is the time to choose. Not tomorrow. Not when life becomes easier. Now. The moment a heart chooses God is the moment the entire spiritual atmosphere shifts." My child, I felt the truth of this settle deeply. So many wait for a perfect season to return to God. But heaven calls in the middle of the storm, in the middle of the distraction, in the middle of the exhaustion, because the perfect moment is rarely the moment God chooses. He chooses now because now is the only moment eternity touches. Michael continued, "Tell them to forgive when they have held bitterness. Tell them to release what weighs their soul. Tell them to walk away from the voices that pull them from purpose. Tell them to guard their hearts more fiercely than they guard their schedules. For the heart is the doorway through which tomorrow will either strengthen them or shake them. As he spoke, I saw the truth of his words play out in my spirit. I saw someone letting go of bitterness, and instantly a weight lifted from their shoulders. I saw another stepping away from a destructive voice, and suddenly their path brightened. I saw someone choosing to trust again, and light began to fill the room around them. Michael said, "Heaven sees every choice. Heaven responds to every step. Heaven strengthens every yes." Tell them that the preparations for tomorrow are not found in fear, but in alignment. When they align with God, the danger becomes powerless. My beloved child, it was then I understood the fullness of heaven's message, the warnings, the symbolism, the danger, the protection. None of it was meant to stir fear. All of it was meant to stir awakening, to draw hearts back into divine order, to realign lives that had drifted, to rekindle flames that had dimmed, to remind the children of God that they are not alone, not forgotten, not abandoned. Finally, the Archangel's voice softened with a tender urgency. Tell them that this moment is holy. Tell them that heaven is watching, waiting to strengthen them. Tell them that their response will shape their tomorrow. And tell them that God waits with open arms. My beloved child, the message was clear. This moment is your call. Your turning. Your awakening. The choice you make in this season will shape the next. And now, we come to the final part of this divine message, where heaven seals what it has spoken. My beloved child, come close one last time as we bring this journey to its holy end. After all the visions, all the warnings, all the tenderness and urgency of heaven poured out before me, the room slowly grew quiet again. The radiance dimmed into a soft glow, and Archangel Michael stood before me not as a warrior ready for battle, but as a messenger preparing to depart. His expression softened, carrying the gentle sorrow of one who has delivered a message of gravity, yet a deep peace rested beneath it, as though heaven had now done its part. He looked at me with a fatherly compassion and said, "Now you have seen. Now you have heard. Now you must speak these words with the same love with which God sent them. For the Father's desire is not to shake his children with fear, but to secure them with truth." My child, those words settled into the deepest part of my spirit. This entire journey, every vision, every whisper, every revelation, was not given to frighten, but to awaken. Heaven pleads because heaven loves. Heaven warns because heaven protects. Heaven speaks because heaven longs to walk with you into tomorrow, not watch you stumble alone. Michael's wings unfolded slightly, as though preparing to lift him back into the unseen realms. But before he ascended, he stepped closer and said, "Tell them that God's call is still open. That even now, even in this final moment of the message, heaven is reaching for them." The Father's heart beats with longing for every child who hears these words. Then came a silence so full, so thick with meaning, that I felt breathless. I felt the weight of eternity pressed into a single moment. And in that silence, the Spirit whispered into my heart, "Invite them. Draw them. Call them home." My beloved child, hear me with all the tenderness I can offer. This message is not merely information. It is an invitation, a divine summons, a gentle but urgent tug from the one who formed your soul. The danger of tomorrow, the symbolism of the hour, the warning, the protection, the last hope, all of it leads to this single truth. God wants your heart near Him again. Not later. Not someday. Now. For tomorrow is not a date. Tomorrow is the next turning. The next test. The next unseen moment your soul will face. And walking into that moment without God is walking into a storm without shelter. But walking into it with Him is walking in the strength of heaven itself. Michael's final words echoed with a holy firmness. Tell them that those who return to God now will be strengthened. Tell them that those who listen will walk covered. Tell them that those who respond will step into their next season with heaven by their side. And tell them that this message must not be kept hidden. It must be carried outward so others may awaken before their own tomorrow arrives. My beloved child, this is where your role begins. Heaven has spoken. The message has been delivered. And now the blessing multiplies only when the message travels. If this word stirred your spirit, if it awakened something deep within you, if it drew you closer to God even by a single step, then let your heart respond in obedience. Lift this message. Let it go out. Let it reach others who are wandering or weary or waiting for a sign they cannot name. Let your sharing become a holy act, a divine assignment, a way of partnering with heaven in this final call. Do it not as a task, but as a ministry. Not as promotion, but as purpose. Not because I ask, but because heaven compels. And now, beloved, I speak this blessing over you. May the light of God surround you. May His peace steady your steps. May His presence go before you into every unknown moment. May His voice guide you when the way feels unclear. And may His love cradle your heart as you step into your tomorrow under the covering of heaven. Go forward strengthened. Go forward awakened. Go forward protected. And may the God who warns, the God who rescues, and the God who loves without end walk with you in every breath that follows. Amen.